Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen, dear students. If you recall, last time we had been discussing family. Family as the nucleus where children learn what behaviors as consumers they will adopt in the future. And we had been very specific in considering all the other influences that we had. Previously, we had discussed shopping groups and working groups and so on and so forth. And then we had said that family is very critical in determining what kind of behaviors will come about among the children as they grow older. And I had said to you at that time that as we proceed, we will be looking at the life cycles. And then when we come to social class, this whole logic of studying social influence from a family will becoming more clear. If you see, according to the research that we have, 4% of population lies in a very high social sector, which is called the upper class. And according to information and research, children in those families normally take all independent decisions. They have enough money, so they are not so much under control of their families. So they can take this kind of a decision. And that is why we said that first we have to understand how families come about making these decisions, and then we will connect with the other areas, specifically when the social class and the life cycle comes along, to make it more clearer. When we were talking about a family, the definition that we had given were that it is a couple or two people, more than one person, who lives because of family ties or adoption or by marriage, and they constitute a family. In that family, normally we have parents and children, which is quite normal. But in the Western world, and specifically in China, the latest trend is that there is a parents, and there are a couple which is a parent, and normally they have only one child. And this is what we now call a nuclear family, which is very critical area. And then we have something we call the extended family, which is basically when a grandparent is living with a particular family, as we have already defined. We discussed quite a bit on the various things that a family does and what support is brought in. And we were focusing at the last period, the way the decisions are made or the roles that are played during these decision making in a family as a group. As a group, they work. And therefore, we had discussed that somebody is the person who initiates information or initiates a behavior. Then there is somebody who will control the information flow, and they are normally called the gatekeepers. Then we have somebody who is going to come and finally make a decision. Perhaps the decision maker is more different than the person who's going to buy the product. And maybe the product is not finished at that point. Maybe it has to be cooked, or maybe some assembly requirements are there. So somebody will then put them together, and they are called the preparers who prepare the thing. Then there will be users, and finally we will have people who will try and maintain the system and then dispose it off. Now, the problem and the issue that marketers need to understand is what kind of, in any group, like I was telling you, very elite upper level class, the possibility that the initiator may also be the decider. So the person would combine the two in one, particularly when we look at the children. But in the normal way of life, we find that these roles may be performed collectively or may combine within the same person. For example, I may be the person who initiates and finally also decide myself for the whole family. Or I could be the one who initiates it, but I leave the decision making to somebody else, but then I prepare it and then I maintain it also. That will be my role. But the logic is that these roles and these activities have to be performed by somebody within a group. It's also not necessary that all the activities or the roles have to be performed. It's not necessary at all. Sometimes some roles may be ignored. Let's take an example. For example, if you've gone into a shop and as you are passing an aisle, you find some kind of a chocolate lying there and you pick it up and you bring it. Now, at that instant, there was no initiator. There was just the decider who decided and bought it. And the logic would be that the users may not be the same person. It may not be the same person who actually bought it, because more people will be consuming it. And when we look at the life cycle of a family, and we understand the categorization that we do when we are looking at families, it might be that in a single family, single person family, which is a latest trend into the market where we are looking at, because we are looking at the family life cycle. So though the family we have already categorized, remember that we have already categorized that a family is always more than one person who are living together. Maybe they are blood related, maybe they are adopted, maybe they are married on the basis. But we also see that within the family cycle, it starts from bachelorhood. Now, that's a very significant thing and change, because bachelors will normally try to live either alone or in a family grouping. But the bachelor's behavior would be more distinct than a collective behavior of the family, and particularly if this bachelor who's living within the family is also earning. So the logic of understanding how this dynamic role of family plays in consumption behavior becomes critical. So we had been discussing all this, and we had looked at what are the various definitions and what are the various roles and decisions taken place in different areas. Quickly we recapitulate, and then we move on to the dynamic frame of how children behave within this family setup. And we will see how the children try and influence their parents or the elders who are the people who are finally going to buy. At this point, we know that initiators are people who would initiate or provide the basic input for the purchase. Gatekeepers will try and control the flow of information. Where will we get it from? Who will give it? Whose duty it is to collect information, and so on and so forth. Then deciders come into play. Buyers make the choice. And finally, there are preparers as well as the users who will finally use it. Now, in a family, as we have been saying, that there are dominant features of a family, husband and wife, for example. Then we have children. And among the children, there is also the elder and the younger, and each one will have a different role to play. In research, we have discovered that typically families normally operate under these three conditions. Number one, the husband dominated, which means the father is the dominating person, and all decisions are normally made by him either unilaterally or with little inputs from other people. And we will see where those examples fit in. On the other side, we also see that sometimes it is the wife-dominated framework where wives take decision. Finally, it could be a joint family decision-making system where families pool together. One of the two things happen: either equal distribution of decision-making roles are included, or it is significantly skewed towards one person's inputs. But before we decide which one is the right one and how it happens, we need to understand that cultural frames are very critical, in the sense that the cultural behaviors of a particular environment, maybe a particular context, maybe the social circles that we are in, all play an important part in this. To quote an example, in America, it is normally considered that it is a collective frame for the purposes of making major decisions. But in Japan, it's the other way around. It is more dominated by the father or the husband area. But within this, where cultures are there, even the variation between, let's say, Pakistan itself, urban and the rural area, there will be distinctions. For example, it is more likely that in the urban areas, particularly if the wife is also earning, it will be a joint decision-making process. But in the rural areas, normally it will be the husband or the father-dominated picture. So we, within a country also, based on a significant urban and rural divide, as well as ethnic divide, we will find that decision makings change from parent-oriented or father-oriented to mother orientation to a joint family system. And it is in this context that we believe that the marketers should be very clear as to when they are going to market their products in a particular environmental setting. We are very cognizant of the fact, who do we target or who do we talk to? Because previously when we were talking about the communication process, we had suggested that once we have a message to be given, we need to identify the target, because the message has to be targeted specifically to the needs of that particular person who is going to be the target. And as we see the decision-making process, the target has to be the person who's finally deciding. So when we come to this major thinking process, we should understand, why do we have to basically study the decision-making roles and where the influences would be. And like I was talking to you about, when we look at the cultures, we have already taken care of that. We also look at the particular environments, like we are talking about the urban and the rural, or maybe the people in Balochistan may have different forms of taking decision within the family as against the Sindh area or the Punjab or the frontier. And within even Sindh area, we will see people have different approach to decision making, let's say in Karachi or in Lahore, as against particularly like Hyderabad in Sindh or maybe Gujranwala in Punjab, totally different. Then the marketers required to understand that cultural based and contextual approach to understand the target is very critical. Having said that, we should also not ignore that various products and services require different inputs from different people in the family. Research suggests that most of the time, when we want to go out to eat, basically the decision where to go and what to eat is taken by children. For example, the choice between going to Pizza Hut or McDonald's or going to some other fast food restaurant is normally taken by the children. On the other side, sometimes when there is going to be a party in the family, or the family is going to decide on a party, then it could be the wife who takes a decision where this outing would be, where we will go for food, and so on and so forth. I had already given you an example, and to recall that, in the decision-making process in America, when there was research being conducted by a chain of hotels, which we call motels, and motels are normally small inns where you have breakfast but no lunch or dinner is given, so it's only for people who are traveling from one city to the other. And in that context, the company which was putting up these hotels, and they were very interested in who takes the decision when we are traveling from one city to the other, where to stay and where to eat. So when they took surveys, normally 70% of the time, the husband said it was I who was taking these decisions and not the wife. So it was a very strange kind of a thing, because the wives were quiet. They never gave an opinion. But the husbands normally claimed that they were the ones to take this decision. And obviously, if that was true, then all the advertising or communication message would obviously be targeted towards the men and the husbands when the company was going to promote their own hotel, or what we call, like I said, a motel. So, but the company was careful, and they decided to carry out a little bit more research. So what they did was that they, with agreement of the couples, they placed recording cameras in the cars or in the vehicles that they were traveling, and they were allowed to record all the conversations that take place while couples travel from one city to the other. And after this, recordings were done, and then when they were analyzed, it came about that 60% of the time, the decision to stop at a hotel or a particular motel, or where to go and eat while they were driving, were always invariably taken by the lady, that is the wife. She was taking the decision of where to stay and where to eat. This now totally changed the perception of the motel owners or the chain, and therefore when they try to advertise, all the aspects which would be preferred by a woman were incorporated in their hotel or the motel decor, as well as the promotion that was made was singly targeted to please the woman in the family and not the man. Now think again, though in the survey which was taken one-to-one, as we do through interviews, it was always the man who was saying that I decide. But when observations were taken and it was seen that it was not true, it was the woman. And if you now think that had they gone with the what do you call, the aspect of the men deciding, how much of expenses would have been wasted in trying to carry out this advertisement and communication. This is becoming a lesson for all of us to try and make sure that when we carry out survey, we normally don't rely on one method, but increase the methods, and we should definitely focus. But because the reason basically why we are focusing on the family is that most of the consumption that takes place in the context of the family or the household. That is where we do. I mean, every daily item which is bought is normally bought within the context of the family, and therefore it becomes quite relevant to be able to understand the relationship between various products and services and the decision makers so that we have a proper target to communicate to. Let's go a little further. It's very simplistic, and often that research suggests, for example, the decision to buy a car is normally taken by the husband. But if we are talking about the clothes and the furniture that has to be bought, or the what kind of a bed sheet is required, what kind of towel has to be bought, all these decisions are taken by the woman. And if you collect the monies that are involved in this whole picture, they are more or less equal. One car is bought, let's say, once in 3 or 4 years, but these daily items, the choice of these daily items, what shampoo to buy, what soap to buy, what toothpaste, what kind of towel, what kind of crockery that you need, all these decisions are taken normally, according to the research, by the wife. In most cases, or in at least in the Western world, sometimes these are collectively done. Everybody gets involved in it. So we have a different kind of frameworks where we have families which take decision based on one or the other approach. We are not going to stop here. We will go further and look at where the children get involved, because according to all information and research, most of the time 40 to 50% of the consumption patterns relate to the child in the family, whether it is the way cereals are bought, breakfast things are bought, shoes, clothes for the schools, colleges, all relate to the child. And therefore we need to look at how the children take part in this process. Broadly, in some cases, we understand that there are two types of families. One is where pluralistic behavior takes place, where children also become part of the decision process. On the other side, children are definitely excluded from the part of the process, and the mother or the father, or either of them or both together, will take a correct decision. Whatever the decision they think is correct, they will take it. And therefore, it will always relate to the kind of family behavior has evolved. Now, the issue is also because we have, according to all the information that we have regarding families, particularly in the Western world, there are lesser number of children. And according to research, it suggests that if you have lesser children in a family, their influence, each one's influence will be more. For example, if there is a family of 7 children, it becomes very difficult for one child or even 3 or 4 to try and influence their parents, because the requirement is for 7 children to be satisfied. But if you only have 2 in a family, then both of them can individually have significant impact on the purchase behavior or the consumption pattern in the family. This is very true in China, where according to law, you cannot have more than 1 child per family. So these children have been called as tyrants. Tyrants means somebody who will not listen to anything, and it's like a king who controls every aspect of life. And because he's only the only child, so he's pampered not only by the parents but by the grandparents, and so on and so forth. So according to research, it suggests that fewer children, each one of the child would have a significant influence on the various purchase behaviors. So that becomes a critical point. Now we will quickly look at a few things regarding what we call the tactics which is used by the children, and it's very close to what we watch regularly, though I would not suggest directly that these kind of things may be very significant from the point of view of a marketer, how the child influences, but yes, it can be used in certain cases, which I will explain as we go along. Sometimes children put pressures on their family. What do? They threaten, they have a lot of tantrums thrown, so and so forth. Those people tend to use very pressurizing tactics on their parents by behaving and crying and all sorts of things and getting what they have due. Now, how can a marketer use this, particularly in terms of convincing the father or the mother? And it would suggest that rather than allowing the child to go into this kind of a frame, we suggest that this product will take care of the child's behavior. That's one aspect. Another area is when the child normally tends to push the idea upward. Now, what does he do by pushing the idea upward is basically, he would always suggest that my teacher has asked me to get this, or the elder person, for example, if he's talking to the mother, he will use the father, that Baba ne kaha ki ye kharidna hai, so I'm doing it, or my teacher has said this, that we need to buy this, and so on. So he uses that kind of a upgrading tactics. Third is where barters can take place. For example, child may be asked to behave in a particular manner, or the child offers to behave in a particular manner. He might suggest that if I clean the car, or if I clean the drawing room, or if I do something for the family, he should be able to get the award for it. So here again, the marketers can use these tactics very carefully in trying to suggest that you can get your child to do a good thing, and that is how you promote your product, in the sense that I say, let's say if I have a pen to sell and I say, well, this pen is desired by children so much that they will be able to do a lot of your family work, and they will be able to keep your house clean or whatever. So there can be another frame by which you should be able to see how marketers apply this method. The fourth method that children normally use is coalition. That means they will use a group frame to tell the father or the mother that this is what is required by all of us. Then the other is ingratiating, which means the child will convince the father or the mother that he's been good, he's been nice, therefore he now deserves an award. And you can see that normally happens near the birthdays or Eid days. Children become very well behaved, and they keep informing the parents that I'm doing this good, I'm always nice, meaning thereby that at a point of time he can say, since I've been nice, or I've done well in the school, or I've been good in behavior, I deserve this. The other method that normally children can apply is a rational appeal. Sometimes children use logic, information to convince their parent of the quality of the product. And this is becoming more common now. Why? Because children can visit the websites, and in most cases, children are more knowledgeable about the characteristics, about the benefits, about the good and the bad of the product, and they can therefore bring these convincing arguments to the father or the mother to prove that they are right. And again, this also suggests a very significant fact. That is that most of the companies therefore try and aim, or should aim, their message or their communication through the website to the children also. Why? Because finally it has been suggested in research that children are the main people in the family who actually initiate the buying process. So And obviously, the child, to be able to convince the parent or the father or the mother, will have to have enough significant information. So if a child's knowledge is strengthened in a particular product area, it is most likely that that will be the first choice. And obviously, the website which is providing this information will normally have influenced the child's choice also in terms of the brand. The final we have is consultation. That means sometimes the children are clever enough to incorporate the parent in discussion, that if I wanted to buy this, then what you suggest. That means he is very cleverly, or she is very cleverly, not trying to say that I want to buy, but she is trying to get the ownership of the parent to be involved in the decision making, whereby the parent will become more amenable. Amenable means will be more understanding or more accepting the fact that ye cheez kharid li jaye. But the child is not going through the route of first saying that I want to buy, but the child is proposing that if this was to be bought, then what do you think? And in that frame, he brings out or she brings out all the good points and therefore build the logic of the purchase. Now, I've already discussed and told you that areas are very significant, which is already established, and the marketers should be aware of these areas. For example, logic does not suggest through research that for the car ad, you target the child significantly. Why? Because the choice of the car or the decisions of buying or initiating or whatever would be related to the father or the mother in terms of the choice of the car. Initially, traditionally, what we used to see, even in America or in Western world, that normally the decisions of the car was taken by the husband. But over a period of time, it has come to the point, because families now normally tend to have two cars. One car is used by the father to go to the office or go to his own job. And the second car is normally used by the mothers who may be on the job to drop the children to the schools, colleges, pick them up at the time of break, so on and so forth. So the choice of cars are also now being made by the, particularly the second car is being made by the women. And in that case, sometimes children become involved in terms of the space and the place for the bags and so on and so forth. That is the latest thing coming in the international world, but that is not taken hold up till now in Pakistan. Pakistan, we still go by the father's decision or the husband's decision or the earner's decision to make a choice. But on all other areas, particularly, let's say, clothes. In terms of clothes, the children are considered to be more involved. So they influence their choice of even joggers, for example. So according to research, 90% of the times, the choice of the joggers is made by the child himself. And only 30% of the time in the Western world, the child gets involved in the choice of a car. So you can see the difference. Somewhere it's 90%, somewhere it's 30%. I'd already discussed with you when the children or the family goes out for eating, 50 to 55% of the decision of where to go is taken by the child. And it is the same way in terms of the school uniforms, school shoes, whatever. There is major areas of discussion which are normally taken by the children. Now, what we were talking about is about the child's influence, and in the final logic we can discuss and suggest that families which are more openly communicating with each other, in that the decision most probably would be influenced by the child himself. And I've already mentioned to you that at the current methods that we have, the children have become more involved in the internet, so they are the people who actually bring a lot of information from the internet, and this is what we call the internet maven. Internet maven basically is used as a term to suggest a person who is knowledgeable in a particular area and particular field. So in terms of the internet, the current situation in the world is that the children are more internet oriented than their parents are. though the trend is changing in the Western world where parents are becoming more also involved in the same system, but children still take a higher degree of knowledge in that frame. Now we move on to the family life cycle. Now, rationale says, and if you recall, we had been discussing, and in your marketing classes, you most probably have already gone through this process of trying to understand the product life cycle. The product life cycle suggests how the product is introduced in the market, or put it the family way, how the birth of the product takes place, then it passes through certain stages till the end when it dies or the product dies out. The same concept is being utilized and had been utilized for a long time in the Western world, and its relevance to Pakistan is more significant now because most probably in our cultural behaviors and the methods of our life, we are now more closely reflecting something that existed in the Western world through the family systems somewhere around the period of 60s and 70s. So we have a traditional life cycle of the family, which now, according to the Western world's research, suggests that it is broken down. Now new emergent traditions have come into position. For example, sometime back in the Western world, single parent was not there. It was very seldom that you would find a single parent. But because of the divorce rate going up to a very large extent, single parent is becoming a major area of interest in the Western world. Let's say in the Western world, in America, for example, 29 to 30% people, or close to about between 25 and 30, live alone. That is a very significant number as far as grouping is concerned. On the other side, most probably in Pakistan, we will not find people living alone. That will be the considered opinion. And here we also come into a little bit of a confused area, because household is considered to be the same as a family, but according to information and research, that's not true. Household could be a group of people who are living together. So when we look at hostels, or we look at students living in a rented place where they pool in the rent of the whole place and they share the facilities, that might be known as a household, but that is not known as a family. So in that context, we will find not many people live alone in Pakistan. We normally live in households, though we may not be families. But internationally, there will be more people living in single unit, single person homes, where a larger percentage of women are becoming single person living alone as compared to the men. And men and women, when they constitute together, we find that close to about 40% of people live alone in the Western world. So their purchase behavior, if you just put a little bit of a thought in your mind, would be totally different than a person or a family where 4 or 5 people live. And in Pakistan, most significantly, we will find extended families are more common. If you go out and carry out a survey, you'll find that normally 2 families, let's say the 2 brothers with their individual families will live in the same house. In that same family where you have 2 brothers with their individual families living in the same house, you will also sometimes find the grandparent was also living in that same place. Now imagine the purchase or consumption pattern that will exist in this kind of a setup as against a family which lives in a single unit house and may have only 2 children and 2 parents, or 1 child and the parents, which are husband and wife. So imagine the difference of needs that will exist, and the way they will try and satisfy these needs are going to be totally different. That is why we keep saying that the marketers have to understand the ways families, or now I'm going to add the factor of the household, though this does not fall in the discussion that is currently going on in terms of the family, is important for the marketers. How would they reach these numbers? Particularly if we can also find out how many people are involved in it. If we try and multiply the number of people who are earning in a family with the amount of money they are getting and the amount of incomes that they are generating as a family income, we can see that these targeted markets can swing in terms of the number of products which will be bought by a particular group of family or a family group. This is where we will also be discussing when we go to the social classes, because social classes also reflect behaviors in the way or the patterns in which families coexist. So like I was saying, that in the Western world, even though these patterns have changed, the traditional patterns, so I will try and keep the logic of the traditional life cycle as against the non-traditional life cycle. And before I go further in defining the traditional life cycle, let me very clearly state that the non-traditional life cycle is now becoming where the old people live alone. Maybe they live in their own homes where their children have gone out and there is a major gap in their life. So they live normally alone, but are supported by maybe a servant who comes around, or a servant or a maid comes around and looks after them, but they are alone, which is not the case so much in Pakistan, because we are more traditionally bound by the extended family systems. It's the same thing, particularly in case of a parent in the Western world, where the parent is alone taking care of a child or two children at the same time. So there will be this issue also. A mother alone with a child, and if the mother is working, consider that, and consider a family in Pakistan where the mother is working, but there is extended support of the family in the sense that the grandparent is living, or the sister in terms of hala is living there, or a chachi is living there. So you can imagine the differences in the two. Having determined the difference, we should look at the traditional cycle, because that is more closely related to the Pakistani environment at this point of time. As future comes into position, most probably this will also change. And the change will take place when the economic conditions change and the location for jobs change and the educational frames also change. And when we have more hostels, we have more opportunities to move out of our central locations like villages and towns to go and study in different cities. This whole system that I am describing will also change. But to be able to understand from the marketer's point of view, it becomes very relevant in the frame that if we try and study how many new couples are being generated, in the sense how many people are getting married, तो उनका जो buying behavior है एक married couple का, जिनके अभी कोई children नहीं, child कोई नहीं है, as compared to a couple who has a child, तो उनके जो requirements हैं of products, they will change. And marketers need to understand that, particularly if they can group the various life cycles and then also see how many people live in that life cycle, particularly if we break down the population of the country into their various groups, and also try and look at these groups as they exist in the rural setting and in the urban setting. Also look at these breakdowns in various provinces. We get a very good picture of what kind of product mix would be required, or what kind of services would be required in a particular area. For example, when you find that there are more older people living in a family, we will try and obviously acknowledge the fact that the medical bills will go up. So medical services would be required more in a particular area where there are more elderly people living in an extended family. So this becomes an important concept to be able to understand for the marketers. Now let's quickly go over the various life cycle stages, and we start from the basic life cycle stage, which is the bachelorhood. Now bachelorhood is more important in terms of, like I said, it's got two connotations. One is when you are a bachelor and you are also earning, or you are a bachelor and you are dependent on your parent to provide you the fund, even if you are taking education somewhere, or you are trying to find a job or whatever. The bachelorhood becomes a critical point, because at that point of bachelorhood, the decisions are normally your own, or the bachelor's own decisions. He will not be treated like a child. he will have more freedom to take decision on what kind of consumption behavior will he obviously use, limited within the context of the money available, whether from the parent or from his own sources. So that becomes an important area. If we look at a bachelor in terms of whatever frame, we see where he spends his more money. You'll see that it will most probably on travel in terms of the kind of vehicle he uses for travel. In Pakistan, most probably it's going to be a motorcycle, the mobile phone that he buys, or the communication system that he has. Also looking at the kind of dresses or kind of entertainment that he has to use, what kind of eating places he goes to, and so on and so forth, what kind of group of friends he keeps, and obviously related things. So most of the time it is related to these kind of purchase behaviors. Particularly if this bachelor is also earning good money, we can add a particular aspect of traveling or tourism. That means he has enough money, he does not have any responsibility, he's earning quite a lot. So with a good job, he's more carefree to go around traveling. The second stage of this family life cycle is when marriage takes place, and we call this the honeymoon phase. Now, the honeymoon phase will last till the point when a first child is born. Now, when the child is born, the honeymoon phase finishes and new responsibilities come along. But during this period, when the family or the couple is living together without a child, you can imagine the kind of life they have. You can see it from the two angles. One is, if they are living in an extended family, their choices obviously will be limited. You need to consider this from the Pakistani contextual point and not from the American contextual point. Only, or the Western life would only be logically incorporated when we find that this couple has enough earning to live alone. In that context, the relationship between the similar couples in two countries will become similar. But if they are living within the same country, there are possibility two frames. One, that they have their independent setup, where maybe both work, or maybe only one works. On the other side, the context is of extended family, and they live with the extended family, but again, both may be working or one person may be working. The requirements of the two will be totally distinct. If the person or the couple has gone to set up their own home, their interest would most probably be in the furniture they are going to buy, in setting up a house, in giving parties to their friends, in being more social, maybe even traveling out. But when they are in the context of extended family, maybe they will not need new furniture except for the dowry that comes along, where you have normally the gift is given by the woman's family in terms of a small number of limited number of furniture items or whatever you have. So that would not be their worry, because the rest of the house is already arranged for, and therefore their expenditures will be most probably putting the money into a pool where everybody else also is putting the money, so they can share certain things. And most probably their personal use items would be the area where they will be spending their own money on. So we can understand the differences. And if we can find out as marketers the number of people or couples living in extended families as against number of new couples living independently, then a good choice of the product mix can be arranged for, and the production of products and items could be limited or targeted based on these two conceptualizations. Now we go to the third phase, where the child is born, and immediately, again, based on these two areas, extended family system or an independent location, we'll find that their requirements will be totally different. Now, here is where influence also comes into position. If it is in an extended family, the logic is that all the advice will come from the parents, or the elder brother's family or the elder sister's family, whoever, are living with their same grouping, but particularly if they already have a child and they've already gone through this phase. But if they are independently living, then most of the influence will come from friends, because that is where the location is. Like I said, a couple who's trying to live alone, they will try and socialize, find friends, groupings together, and most of the time the influence will come from that source. So that is where we find that the products bought, the items for the child, whatever is required, will be based on advice. But in both cases, the advice comes from distinct sources. In extended family, family members most likely. In an independent living style, most likely friends and the group or the social group that what is going to be there. Marketers also try to use this concept very strongly, particularly when they use it in China or places where single child family is more dominant. The message normally used to influence parents is that if you don't buy the best for your child, you're not doing justice to the child, or you're depriving the child of a particular value system. So they try and promote high quality, high price products. We can also go into a lot of detail when we talk about parent oriented family, where you have the first child and then two children and the third child coming in. So, I mean, that will be a lot of details, but broadly we look at it that obviously the requirements will change from family with children. Types of things required, starting from nappies to milk to going to the school and school shoes and so on and so forth, and sports things. But let's go to the broader picture where we come to post-parenthood, a phase where there is no child, which means either all the children have studied, have left the home, and now the couple is alone. That means they are alone in the home. So the first thing that we need to understand is that this will be traumatic to the parents. Traumatic in the sense कि एक किस्म का ज़हनी बोझ होता है, because at a point of time they were surrounded by a number of members, their children. They lived through a long period with them. Now they're all gone and these two people are alone. So they have to readjust their living situation. Normally, this is also the stage where the parent, one of the working parents, are going to retire. And when a person is going to retire, obviously he will be having more time on his hand. And therefore, both the couple, that is the husband and wife, will have to reorganize, relearn the living style where they will spend more time together, which obviously, if the person has been working for, let's say, 35, 40 years, it becomes a very difficult thing to do. So therefore, like I said, they will most probably have more money. They will have more flexibility in the choice. They will also have more time. And these things exactly would require changed purchase behaviors or changed consumption behaviors. According to research, it has been suggested that in the international world or the Western world, most of the people in this category now are in the market for luxury goods, because for the time when their children were there, they never tried to buy anything luxurious for themselves because most of the money was being spent on their children. Now, since they are free, they are more into buying new watches, new jewelry, maybe even going for a new car, maybe resetting their own home. Not alone this, they are more into travel also. So if they are healthy, particularly, then these will be the activities that they will be involved in: tourism, going around the world. But if they are not healthy, then obviously things will change. Though they will have money, they will be obviously looking after themselves in different forms. So there is a change in the lifestyle and the behaviors. It's also very obvious, if you look at Pakistan also, that most of the times the money that children receive in different families come from the grandparents. And according to information or researched information, close to about $35 billion alone in America, which means तकरीबन 35 अरब डॉलर grandparents अपने पोते और पोतों के ऊपर या अपने दोतों के ऊपर या अपने ग्रैंड चिल्ड्रन के ऊपर गिफ्ट्स के तौर पे या तोहफों के तौर पे खर्च कर रहे हैं, which is a very huge market, and it suggests that particularly with the changing lifestyle and particularly with better economic movement in the country, with more lifestyle changes, grandparents become a big market for buying things for children rather than the parents doing it. So you can see that on birthdays, normally the child, rather than looking at the parent for a gift, would normally tend to look at the grandparents for the gift, because grandparents normally tend to indulge their grandchildren. And this kind of frame is very strong in the evolution of the new lifestyle. Further, particularly in the Western world, adult communities are now into position, which means the older people normally tend to get together in clubs or in social work and so forth. So they have a different kind of life habits, and they contribute in a different form, because even grandparents or people who have retired still believe that they can contribute to a life or the society as a whole. So their attitudes and their purchases and their behaviors are tending towards these things. Finally, we have a life cycle. When we say that the product life cycle is declining, in our case, we call the family life cycle dissolution, which means dissolving the family. And that occurs when one of the spouses, which means husband or wife, dies. And this leaves the single person alone. Now, it is at this stage that many things happen. Typically in Pakistan, one of the parents who is left alone will tend to move in with their child, or then become part of the extended family again. So the cycle repeats itself. Today we have concluded, therefore, at the final stage, everything about the family and the influence and why marketers need to understand this. Now, in the next session, we'll start looking at the social class, and then try and link up between these two things, where the families come into position and the behavior of the social class. And with this integration, we'll be more clear as to what marketers can do when they are promoting their products and so on and so forth. Okay, so this brings us to the conclusion of the lecture, and I suggest that we look at it, social class systems, in the next class a little bit in depth. Therefore, Allah Hafiz and take care.